Hey everyone, I'm Lynn Thomas with Arenas for Change, or ARCH for short, and really excited to welcome you guys to come and be part of this conversation with Bettina Shultz-Jobe, co-founder of Natural Lifemanship. And we'll introduce her in a minute, but first I want to introduce Amanda Graham, who's on our ARCH creators team. Thanks, Amanda. Amanda's behind the scenes of our behind the scenes, helping us with the technical side of things. And feel free, you guys, to put in the comments, any comments you have, any questions you might have, to be part of this conversation. And so Amanda may pop in here and there. So you say, hi, Amanda, to share some of those that you guys are sharing in the comments. So, but yeah, let's move over to Bettina too. Bettina, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this and to spend this time with you. And we've known each other quite a while. Like, I don't know, it's probably been like 20 years. And back in the days, like I also co-founded eGala, and you were part of eGala. Tim Jobe, your husband, co-founder of Natural Lifemanship, also was on our eGala, one of our founding board members of eGala.
Yeah.
And we traveled some of that journey together. And then you and Tim co-founded Natural Lifemanship in this journey. So we're going to share with you guys what led us to this conversation that we're having today. But before we kind of go through that little journey about how we landed here, would love to hear, Bettina, if you're okay to share, just introduce yourself and what led you to Natural Lifemanship, and a little bit about Natural Lifemanship to share with everyone. So
yeah, so my name's Bettina Shultz-Jobe, and my husband is Tim Jobe. And yeah, we started Natural Lifemanship about 15 years ago. And, you know, right before we got on this call, Lynn was like, you can share a little bit about what, got you to start Natural Lifemanship. And I was like, gosh, I haven't answered that question in a long time. And so I think a couple things. One of the reasons that we started doing our own trainings and teaching people how to do this work, there were really two high-level reasons. One was because we had begun to learn so much in the field of neurobiology and trauma-informed care and attachment theory, the whole interpersonal neurobiology world. And at the time, that wasn't being integrated into the equine-assisted services all that much. And it was in that world that we started to understand so much about why what we were doing was working. And it helped us like massively shift the intentionality of our work, right? So that we were having less accidental, I always call it accidental success, less accidental success because we knew what was going on. And then the other piece is, because we were in that world of like trauma-informed care, one of the really big messages there is that the relationship is the vehicle for change. And so that's really what Tim had spent over 20 years really working with, is how does this relationship between the horse and human start to bring about healing, and how do we then transfer what they're learning there to other places in their lives? And so our like mountaintop we were screaming from at the very beginnings of all this was all about how important the relationship between the horse and the human is in this work. And so, we were talking lots about not wanting to objectify horses, right? And the horses are not tools, that they're a real relationship with the human being. And so the manner in which that relationship was built was a huge foundation for Natural Lifemanship, and it still is. So those were two sort of like, I don't know, like not like gaps, but things that weren't being taught in this field yet at the time, like this really massive respect of the horse and the relationship with the horses from our perspective. Mm-hmm. So we started our business.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I think we'll come back to some of that in our conversation, the neurobiology and relationships and working through that and honoring that. And I wanted to share, first of all, I appreciate what you guys have brought to this field and to this work with mental health, personal growth, incorporating horses. If you guys aren't on Natural Lifemanship's mailing list, I encourage it, because you guys put out so much great content and helpful information. And that's kind of what led to this today in our conversation. So you recently wrote, I don't know if it was that recent now anymore, but you wrote an article on the Natural Lifemanship blog called Connection Without Projection. Let's see, I gotta look at it. Why healing begins with what's real. Connection without projection, why healing begins with what's real. And I do like to read all the stuff you guys put out there. It's like I said, very thought-provoking. And one of the things I especially love with our conversations is because we both come from the perspective of how can we help support facilitators? How can we teach? How can we train? How can we support facilitators and being the best they can be in doing this work? And that really comes from an additional perspective on top of facilitating this work to really like start to dissect it. And well, how can we help people replicate this or understand or better utilize it in their work? And
you know, that's one of the, when you and I talked before, I think I said this, and I say this a lot. I'm like, teaching people to do the work is a completely different thing than doing the work. And what it means is that sometimes, or at least in natural lifemanship, we're always trying to break down all the components. I mean, Tim's brain really works that way. So we oversimplify. Like we'll even say a statement. I'm like, that's an oversimplification, but like you get my point, right? Like what I'm teaching people is because it's challenging. It is challenging when you start to then break down what it is that we're doing. And in the moment, right, as a helper, healer, therapist, coach, whatever you're doing, right, your choices are likely going to be different than the exact thing you learned from somebody in a certain approach or modality, right? Yeah.
You're right. And I think that's what we started talking about. So is those kind of nuances. And yeah, the space we work in with horses and nature is constantly changing. And as facilitators, and we're constantly adapting and being flexible with our styles and what our choices of interventions. So how to teach that? So I really enjoy our conversations around that perspective. And so I read your article, and it included concepts around metaphor and projection and story and presence and relationship. And there's a lot to it. I think we included a link on this. We'll if you guys haven't seen it yet, you can check that out. Right. And as I read some, I was like, oh yeah, that is really, for me, from my perspective, yeah, okay. And then some other things I was like, actually, with ARCH and Arenas for Change, maybe we might have a little different angle, a little different perspective of how we approach it and the lens that we look through. And so I thought, well, I'll write an article about like the ARCH lens on those kind of similar concepts of how we incorporate projection, metaphor, presence, and all that. And I started writing an article, and then I reached out to you, Bettina, and I said, hey, Bettina, just so you know, I thought I would write this article to kind of have this kind of like sharing maybe similar perspectives, different perspectives. And I really appreciated one of the things you said. You said, Lynn, like collaboration, that's what collaboration is. Collaboration is not people of like, doing the exact same thing coming together. It's people coming together who have different lens and different perspectives and how we learn with each other through that. And so you were so gracious, and we hopped on the phone and a phone call and just talked through some of the different ideas and thoughts. I sent you my draft, which has yet to be published. That's a story in and of itself. But yeah, no, I really appreciated that. And we were able to hop on a call and start kind of sharing some different thoughts and ideas. And so I'm wondering with that, if you have any thoughts on what I just shared there, but maybe to go ahead and, well, let me back up a little bit. And then we thought we'd have another conversation where we'd invite all of you guys, that anybody who'd like to come and participate, because I know I personally learned so much in our conversation and want to keep learning. And I know that with you guys here who are listening and participating, you'll add in your thoughts and questions and ideas, and it just makes us all even better at the work that we do. So I would love to just pause and turn it over to you, Bettina, just to share some thoughts around that. And then maybe you can go ahead and start sharing a little bit about the article itself.
Yeah. This conversation about collaboration, I wrote a blog about it years ago where I was basically comparing. Because what I love is this idea, one of our number one principle in NL is that a good principle is a good principle regardless of where it's applied. So I love when I start to see a principle that we believe to be true all these other places, right? So like even our brain, the way our brain develops is that not all the neurons are doing the same things, right? And from an attachment perspective, when we don't differentiate, we can't be healthy. In our brain, if our neurons don't actually differentiate and migrate to where they'll be utilized and then find connections to each other, the brain will not work. Like this idea of differentiation in the trauma field and also in the attachment world is so important, right? And I've thought about it lots of times. And I think that is what we talked about was I was like, we're always thinking collaboration means we all get together and it's like a lovely agreement party. We often talk about that. Let's get together to collaborate and find what we have in common. And sometimes I think the most powerful collaborations is when we find out what we do differently, and then how we work together within that. And so I enjoyed this conversation. And so you and I talked for one evening for 2 or 3 hours.
It was over 2 hours. It was awesome.
And we were like, okay, we should just, when you suggested we do this live, I was like, I love that idea. Because one of the things, and the reason I love it, and I'm so appreciate you reaching out, is that also when we write about something, it's so hard to include all of the nuance, like all of the nuance about connection and projection and metaphor and how we utilize that in the work that we do. Like that could be a whole book, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Right now I don't have time to write a whole book. And so, it was it was pretty short blog actually in the grand scheme of blogs. And so you gave me the opportunity to be like, well, no, that in real life, that's not how that would necessarily play out, that comment. Like when we started being able to kind of talk back and forth about it and found where we might be different, but also where we're similar, both. We found both things.
Mm-hmm.
So that blog is okay. Is it good to jump into the?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay. Or is there anything else you want to add before I do that?
No, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. I get going sometimes and realize I need to breathe. Breathe, Bettina. So, okay. So the blog, this idea about how we use metaphor in this work that we do has been a really important part of what we teach from the very beginning. And it's been one of the more, like sometimes it felt inflammatory because so much of the work that's done in the equine, in fact, if you Google, like why do we integrate horses, you'll hear lots of this about metaphor. And so, one of the things that we've been saying from the very get-go is that we don't want the horse to be a metaphor for another relationship. We want the relationship with the horse to be real. And in the very beginnings of building our business, just because we were one of the first that was kind of the newer, there was like a gala and path. So we were one of the first kind of popping in that way. It felt inflammatory to people. And so we started trying to figure out more relational ways to handle having these conversations. We're always growing and wanting to practice what we preach. And so I've been mulling over how to write about it for quite a while and landed on this short blog to touch on the topics, right? And really, it's the first thing we've written about that since this first bit in the manual 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And we wrote a little something about it at one point. And I will tell you, Lynn, we got what I felt like was hate mail. I mean, people very upset about us saying the horse should not be a metaphor. In what we teach, we don't think so. So this was our first attempt at that. My first attempt at putting something out there again, because it's an important concept and people ask us about it all the time in the people training with us. It comes up in my consults, right? And so that's really what the blog was about, was to start to help us look at how we manage the relationship itself with the horse being where the healing is happening, and what is this, how do we be truly like present and in the moment in the work that we're doing. I think that's enough to say. Are there is there anything else I should say?
I love that. No, and thank you for being bold to put ideas out there that might not be the status quo. I mean, I think that's where growth and learning really happens. So I think that's amazing. And of course, that's where our conversation came in, because like, okay. And actually, I would love to hear more when you say the horse is not a metaphor and be with what is happening in the moment. Can you share more about how you're looking at what metaphor means, like how that's being defined on your end? Yeah.
Sure. I'm going to ask you actually. So one of the things that you did a good job, I know you haven't released the blog response, although
Yeah.
what I'll say, Lynn, is it was very good. I mean, at some point, people will get some iteration of it. Because, one of the things that you did is you started to, you had described what you all do related to story in a way that, in the best way I've ever heard it described. I was like, oh yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And there was a lot of what you were describing that I was like, yes. And we do that in our work, I think in maybe a subtly different way, but the principle of what you're doing, we are doing, it might play out a little bit differently. Maybe. Mm-hmm. Actually, it will, because even what I teach, the people who are trainers teach it differently. And we're all going to integrate this work, right, in finding our own flow. But one of the things that you did in the beginning was you were like, hey, I want to clear up some language here, like get around, like, from your perspective, what is metaphor? What is projection? What is story? You started to do a little bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that here, and then that sets the frame for this next part with me. Is that okay? We don't have to.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if these definitions were kind of where you were coming from. And, the idea of metaphor, is, one thing kind of symbolizing, representing, or being, to another, because it's very similar. There's something that resembles each other in it.
Yeah.
And, from my perspective, everything is everything's a metaphor in life, where everything's metaphoric. Like, that's how I kind of look at the world. That's, to me, how we learn, we live, we are always bringing in our past experiences. So projection then would be I kind of look at projection in a couple different ways. One is the psychodynamic definition of, it's the something unconscious is getting projected onto another person or object or animal or something. And we're not acknowledging that it's coming from ourselves, because it's coming from the subconscious place, from our past, right? And that's what I understood how you're saying that. And then, of course, also look at projection, not so psychodynamic, more just like, hey, the concept of a projector projecting on a screen. We are, we can maybe utilize the concept of projection in the work that we do, right? Like we're maybe placing our ideas symbolically into the space. And so that's projection. I'll stop there before I get to story, because I didn't know if you have some thoughts on metaphor or projection, right? From that.
Yes. So in the blog, and then also I did a little webinar to follow it up. I don't know if it's I told you this, I don't know if it's my favorite webinar. I'm not always, all of our webinars end up being where I think I'm doing my best work or not. But what I did talk about, this idea that the horse, so really, I'll back it way up to the simplistic way that metaphor can be used, right? So one of the things that we will see happen in this work a ton is that people begin to work with their horse in some way. So like in natural lifemanship, we often have somebody choose a relationship that they might want to start building. And there's various ways to start that, but they'll start to build a relationship and get to know, in this really nonverbal, powerful way, get to know the horse, right? Mm-hmm. And there are times that there starts to be maybe there's some difficulty in the relationship. Maybe there starts to be a little bit of conflict, or our clients get frustrated because it's not going how they'd hoped it would go. Right. It's so common that my clients come in with, like, they've watched Heartland or something, and they have an idea about how supportive and easy it might feel. And maybe as we can, and sometimes it is in the beginnings, but like as we progress in any relationship and it gets harder, then other things come in, right? And you've seen it, and all of us who do this work have seen where the client starts to, there's a trigger that comes in, right? And it's not only about this horse. And they might say, this horse is like my mother or my ex-husband or any of that, right? And so what we have seen in this work, 15 or 20 years ago, what a lot of us were taught to do and did do is that then we would start to call the horse mom, right? Or dad. I'd start to call them that, or the different horses. I assign them sort of a different role in my life, and I call them those names. And so from a very simplistic perspective, that's part of what we're talking about when we're saying the horse isn't your mom, though, right? And so for us, this is objectification. This is putting something on the horse that the horse doesn't really get to choose to take on, right? And so I talked about that to some extent and where that can start to be dangerous in the webinar that I did. I shared a story of a client where the first time that Tim and I became real aware, like, oh, wait, this could be a big problem if we do that, And so it's like when you and I talked, I was like, it's not that we'll be like, that horse is not or even gently, that horse is not your mother, right? We're going to ask all kinds. I will ask when that happens. I'm like, oh, tell me more. How is this horse like your mom, right? But I'm not going to start calling the horse mom or dad or whatever it is. We're not going to, I call that like kind of going with the projection. We're not going to like go with it. We're going to start unpacking it. And that unpacking could take, depending on what your pacing is, it could take a year, the unpacking, to help them come into a place that's a genuine relationship with this horse, because and this is where the language gets, where like you were in your blog, you're like, let's talk about metaphors, not necessarily projection, and projection is not necessarily metaphor, and they can be related. And I let them be kind of related in the blog, I think. So we can start to move into this metaphorical thinking where we have put something we've brought something from our past relationship into this relationship with the horse, and we're not aware of that. Right. And that would be where you'll see where projection and metaphor starts to have some similarities. If we go with it, my complaint in the, my concern for the horses and that, like, the ethics of the work with the horses has always been that if we go with that, we're encouraging the projection instead of helping to unpack it in a way that helps us come into healthier relationships, right? This idea that if somebody's in a relationship with me and they start interacting with me as if I am their mother in a therapeutic sense, we generally know that that's something we have to start to unpack. That projection is going to need some support.
Right. Yeah.
Like the question, I'm rambling. I got to.
Well, there's so much there. That's why I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is all great stuff. And so I do want to come back to, and then I want to come back to unpack the projection too, because that's, I think, going to be very interesting. And then we'll come back to story. So all of that. So objectification of the horse. I would love to learn more about that. And, because, all aligned on the ethical treatment of the animals and everything like that. Can you say more about how a label like that, and whether a facilitator may choose to do it or not choose to do that, but can you say more about what it means to objectify the horse, just to better understand that concept?
Yeah. And I actually noticed that I do get to see some of the
oh, good.
Some of the comments. You told me I may not be able to see people's comments.
I wasn't sure.
Although I'm realizing I can't listen to you and watch them too.
Yeah.
And that's not working. So we believe really strongly.
I saw your thinking. I saw the word. I saw thinking, and you mentioned the comments. And I was just texting a colleague saying there's some great questions, and we're waiting for the right moment to bring them in. Yeah. So I thought one of them that I thought really pertains to what you're talking about, if I can read it for you. She says, many people are saying they love the conversation, they love the perspective, and thank you. This one person says, I'm interested in the word real. Yeah. Did you see that?
Yes,
when Bettina says it is something different from the projection or the metaphor that the client is talking about, how can that not be real?
Yeah.
Why do you frame it as just, it is, yeah, anyway. So you see that. I'm just wondering if that would fold into where you're headed, Bettina.
That is. I saw that question. I was like, okay, wait, I'm trying to read. I think this is a great one. Yes, I love it. Yeah. Okay. And when I start rambling, because we only have so much time here, then, you can stop me and help me. So it is, so this is not the best use of the word, potentially, is that it's not that it's, so even if I'm going to back, so here's the thing that's helpful for me when I'm thinking about the work with the horses is, if we did that with people, or we did that with the therapist that we're in relationship with, right? How would we handle that? And what makes us decide to handle it differently with the horses than we would with a person? That doesn't mean that we wouldn't handle it differently, but is there intentionality about why we would do that, right? So I'm going to back it up a little bit and say, like, with me as the therapist, because I'm kind of a therapist first, right? Whatever's happening between me and the client, that's real. Sure, right? We're in a relationship together, right? In this moment. And I am bringing all kinds of things into this moment with the client, and the client's doing the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. So what we have seen happen at times is that we forget, right? That, so if the client and I've had this happen lots, where my clients start to interact with me in a certain way that I realize is not what's going on with me. Or I'm going to think another example would be like in the marriage relationship, right? Moments where Tim and I've been in a conversation, I think he wouldn't mind me sharing this, but like when we've been in a conversation, I was like, yeah, I'm not your ex-wife. Like there's something from that previous relationship that's coming in here that's coloring the way that you see what's happening. Mm-hmm. Now, therapeutically, I handle it a little different in marriage than I do in a counseling session, right? So when we realize that that's happening, we start, clinically speaking, start thinking about how will I guide my client into being in a relationship with, because the healthier our relationships are, we're in relationship with this person in front of me, right? And as I've continued in my own therapy work, I've started to recognize the ways that I bring like the ways that I will bring the experiences I've had with my mom, which have been hard for me. I will bring that relationship into other relationships. And that's not what's going on here in this relationship with you, Lynn, for example. And it's been an important part of my own unpacking of the work, right? Mm-hmm. So when we say a real relationship, I think what we're trying to get across, right, is that the relationship with the horse can be, and I realize horses, there's a whole other conversation here. Horses are not people, and they have different ways of communicating and all the things, but it can be a genuine, like, relationship with this horse right here in front of my face, where I can start to learn how, and there's going to be different ways to facilitate this, how to unpack what it is that I'm bringing into the relationship. The concern, I think, in the work a lot of times is that we forget that the horse is let me give an example. I'm going to give a little example of this. So like, I love all ways of processing trauma. I love it all. And so I have trainings and all the things, right? And so, EMDR, IFS, brain spotting, TIR, psychodrama, I love it all, right? And in all of those modalities, psychodrama is an example. When we start working out a story, like a trauma story, right? One of the things that's often discussed in those modalities is how important it is that if somebody decides they're working out a story, that their mom, where they have the trauma with, is not ever me personally. I don't play that part. I don't take that on, right? That there's a lot of danger in me taking that on. So in the psychodrama world, they will say that rock over there, that can be their mom. That tree over there, some of us get even tricky about the tree because it's a living being, but like the inanimate things over there, that empty chair, right, can be their mom. But I never am, not as the therapist. That's not appropriate in a lot of these models for processing trauma. And so then the objectification happens when I go, yeah, I would make the rock over there my mom, and I would also make the horse my mom, or my ex-husband, or my whatever, right? And so I think that's where the objectification piece comes in for us, or what we're thinking about. So I do agree that it's a real relationship when the metaphor and our projections are coming into it. I think it has to do with the way we facilitate the unpacking of that, as opposed to the just going with it and like, let the horse be, let the rock be, let the dirt be, let the poop be, let the horse be. You hear? And so that's where we start to feel tricky about it. Does that make sense? I don't know. You talk.
Yeah, sure. No, thank you. And there's been like all these comments coming in too. So yes. And so I think that kind of leads into maybe talking a little bit about, in ARCH, we talk about working through a story-based framework. And, so it's coming from a more narrative, constructive, this kind of view kind of thing. And so, the idea of what's real, and so we look at the experience itself. So there's the one idea of story, which is we have our past narratives, the narratives we carry around based on our past experiences that we are putting on the world around us, right? And we're looking at the world through those beliefs, through those stories. And so that's one element of looking through story. But the main element of working through story in ARCH that we focus on is that to help us as facilitators to organize the information and work through this as we talk about what we feel it helps in emotional safety, promote emotional safety, clients feeling seen and heard, is looking at the session itself as a living here and now story, right? Which is aligned with what you're saying. Like this is the story that we're in right now, the story of this session. Facilitator, horses, client, nature, rocks, trees, all of that are in this story together. And so when a client brings up, oh, you're just like my ex-wife, or this horse is just like my ex-wife, from a facilitator standpoint, it's acknowledging, like you were saying, maybe explore a little bit, at least acknowledging the ex-wife is in this story right now.
That's right.
And even though this relationship with the horse or in a real person to person, husband and wife, like you were talking about, it's like, oh, ex-wife is here with us right now too.
That's right.
And honoring that. So whether as a facilitator, you decide that maybe this horse literally plays out that character, you could say the ex-wife is now here and the horse is reminding me of my ex-wife. Even if we say, the horse is not your ex-wife, right? This is a different relationship right here, right now. I think one of the things we look at is, even if we try to push it aside, right? Ex-wife aside, ex-wife is still there.
Oh yeah.
Ex-wife has shown up in this story, right? And so, I feel a little different about whether that's objectifying the horse, even if you choose, like, we talk a lot about in ARCH about looking at stories through soft eyes and soft ears. This comes from our co-creator, Lynn Moore. And that it's really beyond, this is not just about the ex-wife. We start getting to the characteristics, like you said, what is it about this horse that reminds you of your ex-wife? And then it's like, oh, well, being stubborn or, not listening to me or whatever they say. So that's starting to be more the characteristics of like, okay, seeing this relationship right now as stubborn, not listening to me, that's it. So I kind of, in many ways, people might jump to saying this horse is ex-wife, when really it's more about the characteristics that are happening, the dynamics in the relationship. However, still acknowledging ex-wife is there. Ex-wife is a character. And so I wondered, I guess I don't look at it as objectifying so much, because we're not holding the horse as the ex-wife. We're holding the horse as the horse. And the value that one of the values the horses bring is that if that projection or if that label needs to transform, the horses start changing and shifting that story, right? They confront, no, this relationship is not the same as the one you had with your ex-wife. And as a facilitator, you're guiding them through that.
Yeah.
But I wondered if, like, even if the idea of the horse is not a metaphor, however, the relationship with the horse can be metaphoric, because we are replaying our stories over and over again. We talk about in ARCH, like all we're doing is replaying our stories over and over. It's just different characters, different locations. Okay, we're in a different location here with a different character of the horse. And we're replaying our story again. Yeah. And so any thoughts on, I thought I'd share more about this idea of when we talk about working through a story mindset, a story lens, we're really just like, this is a story we're in right now. And this character has shown up. The stubborn is a character. The rock is a character. Not listening is a character. And we look at all these as characters and start like, okay, they're playing a role in the story. I wonder where the story's going to go, because the benefit of the horses and of nature itself is they are themselves. They are themselves. And because they're themselves and their constant movement in nature, they very organically and naturally shift those stories that need to be shifted without even being conscious about it. And that's why I say I don't even
so dynamic, right?
Horse, not label a horse. I don't even think that's what matters as much. But yeah, any thoughts there? Just
Lots. Oh my gosh, so many. Yeah,
1 hour is not going to be enough. We already know this.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. There's so much nuance in here, right? Because I might even now. This is how I practice. Doesn't mean how everybody practices who's integrating what they learn with us, right? I might I'm going to ask those questions, right, about the horse. How is this horse like? You know, your ex-husband, whatever, what it is, right? And I'm probably going to do so much in the moment, like, 'cause I'm so body-based in my approach and movement-based in my approach. I'm going to really want to understand, like, as that's happening, how that's really affecting the person in front of me. Because there is this part of me, right, that goes, okay, so and this is why I think understanding, like deeply understanding the relationship that's being built between the horse and person is important, because I'm noting the patterns that have been showing up, you know, as they're working together. And I'm like watching, thinking, okay, so the horse actually isn't stubborn at all in the background, right? Like, the horse has been trying their damnedest to do exactly what this person is asking. And the person is, maybe they haven't been being clear. They've been being triggered by asking for anything at all. They're not, you know, kind of coherent in their body. They're not regulated, all the things, right? I'm watching it like, what might be happening here in the dynamic between the two of them? I mean, it's just to explore, right? We're just like, it's a hypothesis. I heard at our last conference, Shultz-Jobe did a great presentation on facilitation. And she said for her, she thinks about facilitation as the scientific method, kind of like you see something and then you have a little hypothesis and then you start doing things with your questioning and with your facilitation to test it out. Right? Like, I so that works for me. Right. So you're forming hypothesis, but it doesn't mean that you're deciding the answers for things. It's just sort of you watch. And how long it might take to kind of unpack what's happening with them and help them figure this out it may not be one session. So it may not even, I may never say this horse, you know, I'm probably never going to say this horse is not stubborn, but that's one of the number one, like things people will say. Right. And I do start asking sometimes, are you noticing what the horse might be asking you? So I'm going to bring the horse more in when they label those things, right? What might the horse be asking of you? Because oftentimes the horse is saying, I need this or this or this. I need more. So they have a voice in that, right? The horse is often saying they need something else from the person. And if the person's ready, if we're there and I can start helping them read what's happening more with the horse and understand what the horse is asking, right? Usually it's not that, I would say never is it that the horse is being stubborn, but I hate using extreme language like that. Try to be tentative in my language. So I do think there could be situations where the horse knows exactly what to do. And maybe, I guess they're being a little more, it's willful. They're hardly ever being willfully stubborn though, right? And so I think that it's in those moments that I'm like, yes, ex-wife has entered the story. Stubbornness has entered the story and how that affects you, right? There's all this in here. And I am trying to guide them to like what's actually happening with the horse. It doesn't mean it's happening in 1 hour. Of course, you know, some of what affects the work I do is that nowadays I work with people for 4.5 to 5 hours at a time and 3 to 5 days. So we're doing intense work. So we have time to let this unfold. It's not like it's unfolding in 1 hour, right? And so the concern from the sort of what the objectification piece, right, becomes is when the horse can help them get to that place of the horse isn't actually stubborn like my ex-wife. I'm just using an example. I think the way we facilitate also helps them get to that place. Right. And so it's why, to me, the dynamic between what is like where I will start to be bothered occasionally is like people start putting all this meaning right on what the horse is doing. And maybe the horse is like among horse people, we know we often have a sense for what the horse is actually doing. And it has nothing to do with what the story they put on it. I am going to unpack that whole story, though. Like, I want to know it. I want to hear it. We're going to play with it. And then we're going to start doing little things like, maybe, do you notice the tightness in their muzzle right now? You have a sense about what that might mean. So they start to go, actually, maybe it's that the horse isn't stubborn. My horse has stress. Maybe my horse has stress because I wasn't actually being really clear. And I wasn't being clear because the more I help them come into their own bodies, really sense in that moment, the more we can start unpacking that in a way that helps them know the horse in front of them instead of the way that they're choosing to know the horse. And man, we really do project a lot onto the horses. We do it more than we do with people, I think. Because we've started, we don't realize the depth of real relationship that can be happening there.
Right. Yeah.
That's what you said, Lynn.
Oh, yeah. No, that was, and again, I know, because that was one of the areas I wanted to get in, and maybe we won't have time, I don't know today, but the unpacking the projection part and what that process looks like and what that means. And yeah, I mean, because from a story lens, we're looking at whatever's brought in, whether it's imaginary, whether it's past stories. And you're right, I believe we are always projecting, and projecting is not always, I mean, we wouldn't be attracted to someone. We wouldn't be attracted to that certain horse without projection happening, right? There's things that draw us, and it's usually things from our past experiences that are drawing us to these moments that are happening now. And so, from our standpoint, that is the real moment that's happening right here, right now. These imaginations, these past things, all of this is coming into this moment right here. Yeah. And it's like, okay, this is where we are. And looking at, well, I wonder where the horses will take this. And I wonder where nature will take this, kind of thing, that it kind of helps. And you're right, as facilitators, it is training us and learning to really notice those moments. And I, and that's what I hear, that you're noticing, well, the horse is doing this, or they're doing this, and what's your body doing? And that's what I was hearing you say, at least, and really bringing that into that conscious awareness. Yeah. So I was going to say, there's one of the things you were saying was an important teaching tool that I think we were both really feel is important. And that's about meaning making and what that looks like. Before we go there though, because that might be like another conversation, I'll pause and see if there's anything in the comments or any questions or anything that we might want to go to before we kind of go into that.
Wow. There is so much in the comments, let me say. We're looking at paragraphs here for comments. So okay. I think we definitely have a part 2 of this conversation. One thing that stands out, and I don't know if you're able to see any of this, Bettina. I'm looking.
I was going to say real quick to one person very fast. When I say work with people for 5 hours or 4 hours, not the horse. Never. Yeah, no. Okay. No, in fact, in those sessions, it could be less than an hour, with the horse. Yeah. Right. I just had session with clients, with a client yesterday, and we were with the horses for about 45 minutes in the morning and then another 45 minutes in the afternoon. There's lots and lots of other work that we're doing that prepare us for the horse, to help us process what happened with the horse, prepare us again, then be with the horse, practice skills learned. Yeah. Yeah, no, you can't be with the same horse for 5 hours. Of course not.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And there's another one here, and I will say we have 15 minutes. It's quarter till the hour, top of the hour. Lynn Moore says, seems like a subtle but key piece in this metaphor discussion from natural lifemanship perspective is the referencing the horse So what about the horse is saying that they are stubborn, etc. ARCH, it seems, is a clarifying difference in that we acknowledge that stubborn is here, and then we explore that with soft eyes, soft ears, and soft hearts. Like, what are the characteristics of stubborn? Or what other things show up with stubborn or move out when stubborn is emerging? And I'm not sure how that resonates, Bettina, but just throw that out there as again, another kind of perspective to look at things.
Yeah.
Thinking about that client who said the horse is stubborn.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, what Lynn is saying. Lynn Moore and Lynn Thomas and I kind of talked about this too. And can I back it up just a little bit? And I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to come full circle. Because I wanted to say too, when you were just talking about story, I really love the distinction that you're making between the story we bring in and then the story that's unfolding right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the story I'm writing. Right. I was remembering actually at our, not the last conference, but the one before you and Amanda came. And we had all this rain and all the things. And Amanda said something to me about, and we have this highway, big old highway that's right on our place. And when it's raining, the highway's louder. And Amanda said something to me that said something about what an important character in the NL story this highway is going to be. And I was like, yes, right? Like, you all are living story all the time. I feel that from you. And it makes so much sense. So I wanted to say that first, that I do love narrative therapy. I like using more narrative approaches for especially processing of traumatic experiences. And I love the way y'all are teaching it. I love the approaching and then the coming, like the perspectives you're looking at the story through. I love that. So what Lynn Moore is talking about here is that you will then work as a way of facilitating. You work with that stubborn has entered the story, right? Depending on how people are facilitating, you're going to see that show up all different ways. Natural lifemanship, right? So I can speak to my work really, right? So that could be a part of you that's showing up. This is where I love things like IFS or parts work in general, more from the like Jungian perspective, right? So we may work with a part in that moment. We also might work with, when we sense into, when you said stubborn has shown up, what are the characteristics of stubborn, right? What is happening? Where is that? Is that, like from a psychodrama perspective, we might sense into where that is in our body and can we externalize it and like work with it over there, right? Like, does it have a shape, a color, a texture? And, we imaginally play with that. So we're playing with a stubborn as its own character. That's a facilitation thing. So if some of our like students or people who've learned natural lifemanship, they won't do that because that's not the facilitation like perspective they come from. So how you facilitate completely can change the way that you work with the horses. And y'all are teaching a very specific and I think powerful way of facilitating the way that story is, one, coming into the present moment, but also how it's affecting the story that's happening right now. So like what Lynn said about that makes like perfect sense to me. What I'm not typically fond of is that we just kind of leave it on the horse who's maybe not stubborn at all, right? But I love working with the character of stubborn that's come, and it may be on the horse for a time. I don't know how long it takes to gently help people unpack that. We're not screaming at people. That's projection. The horse isn't stubborn, right? It's not that. We're unpacking it. But I love the way that you're talking about unpacking it. I think that's an amazing facilitation skill.
Yeah. And that's why I think there's a whole discussion we can have on that concept of unpacking the projection. And yeah, it's so fun to see when we put on different lens, different frameworks and how that might impact how we facilitate the process. And yeah, like stubborn, the horse is stubborn. And yeah, from a story lens, okay, the horse is stubborn then. That's the belief system. And even if we as a facilitator think, wow, that's not as a viewer, I don't see it that way, right? If that view needs to be changed, we look at the horse will change it, right? Like the interaction will shift that. And so, yeah, but either way, like you said, what it is about we're looking at providing this space where the stories do change, and whatever that looks like, we're going to use our different ideas and our different interventions.
Yeah.
I wanted to, oh, I better pause again too. Amanda, is there there's like, I haven't been able to even read all the comments yet, but is there anything more that you would like to bring in, Amanda, right now that you think would be good?
You know, there are comments that are interesting, and I know with the time left, I would really encourage or invite the two of you to kind of continue along the line that you are, unless there's something standing out. There's some differing opinions in here, which is always interesting. There are wonderful conversation, a lot of respect for you too. So there's that piece. And interesting how it is to see two very different methods working. So this is very insightful. So I think that there aren't any concepts in here that I think we need to land on, but that you haven't already. But I think just maybe continue to build on where you are, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah,
this is very handy. This is very helpful to have Amanda here with us. Thank you guys. Oh my gosh, this is so fun. All your comments and thoughts. And it is so much fun to have, like you said, Bettina, to have some differences, and we learn so much through that.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about bringing it to something that we actually might share even more. I mean, I think some of it, we are it's on the same line. It's just coming at it from different angles and different lens. And one of the things that we talked about was the people rushing to put meaning, and kind of like, I will sometimes even kind of like force meaning. Like we want so bad for whatever's happening here with the horses to consciously be connected to what's happening in other areas of life, or consciously be connected to their objectives. And so it does sometimes feel like that facilitators might leap into, okay, let's make meaning of what's happening here to somewhere else, right? In other parts of our life. And then that really is kind of taking away from being in that present moment. But what's your thoughts about, I know you teach some things around that and rushing to meaning. That was really a lot of what your article, that was one of the, I think the key high points in your article was about people kind of rushing into trying to, let's make conscious meaning of this. But any thoughts on that?
Yeah. My thought is, and I think it's similar to what you're going to use different language around this, but I remember when we talked about this, is that when we begin to make shifts in any relationship, right, we don't have to, in a conscious way, think about how this is going to be different in other relationships, right? Because there's been an actual, for real, in my body shift in this moment, right? Which means I'm changing. And if I'm changing, then I'm going to bring the new me, the changes within myself to my other relationships, right? And so I think it's why nowadays the work that I like to do is so body-based, because as we start to really sense into what is happening in our body, and we start noticing those little shifts in the way that we move and in the way that we sense in, and then how that affects the relationship that I'm having with the horse, right? As all of that is happening, I'm changing. And when I ask the question, and I know you and I talked about this like, and how does that apply to the rest of your life? It's not even where we are. It's pulling us so far out of it, right? There's such a, and does it not mean that it's not that you never ask the question. Of course, sometimes that question is going to come in, right? How does this apply elsewhere? It's an appropriate thing sometimes. But we're trying to stay in this relationship right now and in this moment. And in your case, you talk about the story that's happening right here, and how that applies outside of the session might not in this moment. Now, again, you're processing afterwards. Sometimes that's really powerful to like go back. Like one of the things I often will do with clients is, because the work we do is so kind of deep in the body, that your body's really what's experiencing it. And so being able to, I always call it to integrate the experience, to kind of think cognitively about what just happened. Go back and be like, and then when this happened, I did that. And then, and I'll be like, oh, and then remember when that happened, you did this. And like, oh yeah, that's right. Like they forgot because they were so deep in their body. Right. So we do start to integrate it more, make more sense of it. And that can be then more powerful on the transfer end, right, of things. But sometimes the meaning that we place on things is more about it can be more about projection or more about metaphor than it is about what's happening right now. So like, I'll even say sometimes, really, so like when the horse is really stubborn, and one of my questions I like to ask a lot is the feeling that the fact that the horse is stubborn, is that kind of a sense that you have, or is there something the horse is doing to show you that? It's one of the ways I'll ask that question. Are you feeling that in your body? The horse feels stubborn. That's different than the horse just did this thing and I saw it and that looked stubborn, right? But we're still trying to stay in the moment of it. Not, Okay, I'm rambling. So you say.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
that was great. And you're right. I think again, one of the things we teach in ARCH again is that the session itself right here, right now is a living story. And we have a concept we talk about being with, right? It's not an original concept, but we focus on the idea of how are we being with the story that's happening right here, right now. And likewise, it can, again, like there's never a never, except for when I say there's never a never. But it's more like, okay, then the story and the elements come up organically. If something is to be connected to something else out in another area that's not here right now, it will come up organically. Just like we said, when they say, oh, the horses are like my ex-wife, okay, that brought in organically something that is bringing in another that's now here present too.
That's important.
Right?
Yeah.
I think the issue can come sometimes when facilitators, try to make that happen. We bring it in, we try to author the story, and we try to direct it with our own like sense of self being like, oh, we really want you to make sense of what's happening here. Yeah. And we also say, like what you're saying, just with story language, is when our stories change, we change. And what that means, when our body feels like we're in a story right here in this session, and when something shifts in that story, the horse moves, we have a response to that. We are changed. That changed us in this moment right here, right now. We are something different has happened, and we are different. And so you don't have to make those connections, like you're saying, and it can be powerful at a point, right? When again, with the flow, natural flow, we talk about in ARCH. We talk about in ARCH too, resonance in our herd keystones, which resonance being about holding that space where horses can, and interchange, that feeling, that being with, is such an important part of this process. And that sometimes we try to rush taking them out of that and getting people in their head and thinking about other areas of life that aren't right here, right now. And again, not there's not a time to do that, but what we're saying when you really follow the story and be with the story that's happening, all of that will happen organically. It will unfold naturally, and the connections will be made very naturally too.
Yeah. And so then the skill set isn't about how you hold that space, and at times when necessary, guide it, because the question you ask helps guide us directions. And the practice of trying to not ask questions that's guiding it where you think it needs to go. Right. Those are the clinical skills, and the decision points. There's so many decision points in session.
Yeah.
And we can make different, it's not like there's just certain decision points that'll get us to one ending. There are lots of ways to come to the same ending in that journey, in this work that we do, I think.
Yeah. And I think the powerful part is, I think that we're both like sharing and teaching facilitators is that's that experiential side of that, being in nature, that being with the horses is what's doing the work. And I think everybody on here probably knows that and agrees with that. And it's how do we hold that space and facilitate in that flowing way our clients through what that looks like. And I love that we kind of are coming at it from some different angles, that all tools in our toolbox, and different ways to look at it, you know. And I have so much more that I would love for us to like the unpacking the projection. I would love to the neurosequential model, the neuroscience, the regulate, relate, reason. I actually feel that has a correlation to what we're doing in ARCH around the different perspectives of being in character role, viewer role, and author role. Not totally the same, but kind of gives some different angles that I think overlap nicely. So, I mean, I think there's so much more. Obviously, we can talk and talk, but I know we're out of our time. Amanda, is there anything coming up or anything that we would want to wrap up with that's in the comments?
Thank you for this conversation. It has been great. This has been inspiring. All of these things are just giving you glowing reviews for the conversation. And I have to say, it has been fascinating. So if you want to do a part 2, I think you'd have some returnees. But I want to, join Lynn in thanking you, Bettina, for showing up and sharing your perspectives.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. I really appreciate it. I have the utmost respect for you, Lynn. We've known each other a long, long time. So I love to get to do some of this work together. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been so fun. Right back at you. And I mean, what you guys, like I said, are doing with Natural Lifemanship is incredible. And I hope that everybody can learn from you, learn from ARCH, learn from all the amazing organizations that are coming at from just different perspectives. And it just adds so much richness to the work that we all do. So this was so fun. I do hope we can do it again. Yeah. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Let me know when.
Awesome. And thank you guys, everybody who joined us. I can't wait to read all the comments after. You can watch the recording on the social ARCH Arenas for Change social media. We'll have it on our YouTube, and certainly we'll share it with you guys if you want to share it anywhere too, Bettina, through Natural Lifemanship channel.
I'd love to. Yeah. Are we going to stay on for just a second after we go non-live?
Okay, we can do that. So we'll say goodbye. We're going to end this live stream with you guys. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you all for being here.
All right, we'll see everyone later.